My name is Uhuru Mofokeng and welcome to the South African Book Review Sessions, your online political book club where everything political literature is dissected, is vivisected, and is eviscerated. When we started this channel, we promised to review a book each and every single day. That's rather very difficult, but we've been managing, and today we're doing our 12th book. We'll tell you all about it in a second. Guys, to those of you who are new to our channel, please click on the subscribe button. There's a subscribe button right there on the bottom of your screen. There's a subscribe button, that button. You go ahead and you click on that button. It comes at no extra cost. You're not going to incur any extra cost for clicking on that subscribe button. Matter of fact, clicking on that subscribe button will make it easier for you not to miss out on any reviews of your favorite book. So go ahead and click on that subscribe button. Now, how are we going to do this? This is how we usually do it. We introduce the book, tell you basically what the book is about, give a rating, and give reasons for our rating. So let's go ahead. Today we are doing our 12th book. The book is by Rob Rose. It is titled Steinheist. Steinheist. It doesn't matter. It's going to depend on your pronunciation. So I'm a comrade, so we must pronounce in that political je ne sais quoi. We must have that ANC je ne sais quoi. So we'll just call it, it's Steinheist. I've said something already about this book. If you can check when I was reviewing this book, I said, if you're going to buy this book with this book. Now, I was not joking. I was very serious. You should not buy that book alone. No, to be unfair. This is a better account. Now, what is this book about? Basically, this book is about the biggest corporate scandal in post-apartheid South Africa. Like, this is huge. Like, this is a huge financial scandal. Like, it's big. It went huge. But then it's not gonna get the attention like the ANC gets whenever one of its comrades does some sort of blunder within the state. Now, but then this is a huge thing. Now, this book is a beautiful book, as I've said. It gives us a better understanding of who Markus Jooste is. It gives us a better understanding. I don't think I've got any other book in my collection which has done the job Rob Rose has done as far as giving us a historical account of who Markus Jooste is. He goes clearly from his student days, from his childhood. It goes through to University of Stellenbosch. It tells us a lot. It goes deeper into the life of Markus Jooste up until the time he started his small furniture making company. There's a company called Goma Goma. It used to produce sofas and those lounge units. Now, as a black township boy who grew up in the 90s, I'm an 80s baby who grew up in the 90s, I can assure you, if your family back in our days did not have Goma Goma, my chief, you were not there. You were not part of the upper middle class of those days. So almost every household of teachers or public servants basically would boast the finish of Goma Goma in their households during the boom days. That company was owned by Markus Jooste, and it was ran in a township in Garankuwa, in those factories, because apartheid government incentivized companies who went and operated in those township factories. It incentivized them with taxes. It didn't really tax them that much. It was lenient when it came to their taxes. So Markus Jooste is a beneficiary of that particular policy. Now, the book tells us into detail about the takeover, about the growth of Markus Jooste, how his company grew, and it tells us about the romantic tale of the company Steinhoff. It tells us about Bruno Steinhoff. It gives us a proper background on who Bruno Steinhoff is, what conditions shaped him, and in which in which conditions did he operate? Bruno Steinhoff made his company big in using in places where it was quite unpopular to trade with. He traded in communist East Germany. He traded in apartheid South Africa with apartheid South Africa. And that was him. That's how his company got that big. And eventually the book tells us of how Jooste eventually went in and took over that company and ran the company, and it grew and it became a powerhouse, bringing so many investors, including Christoph. Yes, we'll get to Christoph. Yes, in a moment. It's very important to talk about Christoph. Yes, we can't talk about Markus Jooste without talking about Christoph. Yes. Now, this book gives us a proper account, but then it also tells us into deeper detail the shortcomings of Markus Jooste as an individual, the flaws of his character and personality, and it portrays him as a greedy thug. It portrays him as a selfish, backstabbing, greedy thug. Basically, the book portrays Markus Jooste as a selfish individual. I will not differ. I can't differ with the author, because personally, this is me. This is Uhuru speaking. Every billionaire, every billionaire must be like Jooste. They all must be self-serving. They all must be backstabbing. They all must think the world evolves around them. So, it can't be so special. That can't just be relegated to Markus Jooste. Now, the author does that, though. He paints a particular picture of Markus Jooste that as he ascends to power, so did his personality, character, and other dubious elements with him got exposed. And before you knew it, things really happened. Because they tell us of a case he had with SARS. Apparently he won that case sometime in 2011, 2012 against SARS. And from that particular case, you can pinpoint on the history and the trail of accounting irregularities within Steinhoff under the leadership of Markus Jooste. The man was an accounting genius. I must say that. The man was an accounting genius. He would always make sure his books balance, and in balancing the books, he'd always find a way of making sure that the profits always outweigh the debts of the company or the liabilities, using accounting terms. Hey, this book, that's another thing I'll tell you about it, about the accounting language later. Now, but then it tells us of how Markus Jooste manipulated accounting systems to serve him, and so that investors would look at him and look at the company and see it as a very profitable company, something worth investing. The book tells us in deeper detail about those things. It goes on to tell us about something rather ridiculous. You'd expect this from, as the media would like us to believe, that black people are really corrupt. No. We are, maybe. But no, not just like this type. You see, Markus Jooste is a proper corrupt Afrikaner male. This man, in 2001, he bought a farm in Neisner. He bought that farm for about 12 million rands. A couple of years later, about 2008-9, he sold that farm to Steinhoff. He sold it for a whooping 160 million rand. And he was CEO. And that is not the only deal. Whenever Steinhoff would buy something, would sell something, Markus Jooste's companies would come there through offshore balance sheet companies. My guy, the man was an accounting genius, but then his accounting, instead of basically assisting humanity, it robbed humanity. It misled investors. It presented his company as doing exceptionally well, while deep inside Steinhoff there was serious crisis. It tells us of how Steinhoff, under the leadership of Markus Jooste, went into a buying spree, buying everything it could buy. It owned so many retailers, from Confarama in France to so many things. it just bought, and most of these companies it bought basically were not as profitable, or some of them are struggling, or didn't make sense. It didn't make any business sense for a company like Steinhoff to buy some of these companies. It gets into detail and speaks about that, and it tells us of how Markus Jooste's accounting cunning used to rely on Steinhoff buying and Steinhoff selling, and he would siphon a lot of money from those particular transactions using this of balance sheet of balance sheet companies which were based in which were based offshores with from countries basically which were regarded as tax havens, your Panama, your Liberia. Basically, Markus Jooste used a system which was used by the apartheid government to basically bust sanctions. That's why, and he used those same methods by creating other companies which cannot be traced with dubious ownership, but then they always link to him and they deliver the goods regardless. Now the disadvantage of Markus Jooste is went up his fall and the fall of Steinhoff caused the country. The impact of the fall of Steinhoff, and the book talks about that. It talks about it into detail. It does not beat around the bush about that. It tells us of how basically the fall of Steinhoff affected the PIC, which basically was an investment for for pensioners, for pension money, for pension for public servants. It was a very sad story. 21 billion of that money was lost through the crash and collapse of Steinhoff and Markus Jooste. Now, the JSE on the day of Markus Jooste's collapse lost about 200 billion rand. This man cost the country 200 billion rand, and that's not the only money he cost the country. He cost the country. The country already was facing a lot of international publicity as far as these rating agencies were concerned. And here comes Markus Jooste. Yes, investors were still coming to the country investing because they believed in the systems of the country to manage the companies and to avoid all of those kind of circumstances whereby money would be siphoned and such accounting irregularities would happen. But then in this case, it happened. And once it happened, investors in other countries saw that, you know what, we were taking our chances, we lost out, and they became quite skeptical to invest in South Africa. And that has a big impact in the country. The amount of funds coming through in a form of foreign investment will significantly be different after the episode of Markus Jooste and Steinhoff. And this book talks about that. It also talks about into deeper detail. And it basically asks us a question: why is Markus Jooste or anyone else not prosecuted or charged or has not stood in front of a court of law because of this Steinhoff saga? And you realize that maybe once again, just like in any other book, as we've said about the nature of economic crimes, maybe just maybe there's not enough political will. Because now Markus Jooste and his people, his former CFO, his former COO, appeared before Parliament. And Christopher was part of that because he was chairperson of that board, of Steinhoff board at that time. He appeared in Parliament, and Parliament engaged, and it did not seem to be engrossed with the issues relating to Steinhoff. Basically, before Parliament could have called all of those individuals, Parliament should have sat down and studied this basic introduction to white monopoly capital, and then studied this one into detail. Then we'd be armored with proper arsenal to go actually engage vociferously with the board and the management of Steinhoff, which costed the country over 300 billion rands. Now, what do I think about this book? I think it's a good book, more especially if it's read in light with this book. Now, I believe this book gives a better account It tells us better of who Markus Jooste is. It gives us, it introduces us to the state, to his establishment within the Stellenbosch mafia. It tells us of his position, of the place he occupied in that particular table, and it was quite a big position. It's an interesting book. How would I rate it between a 0 and a 10? I'd rate it a 6. I'd rate it a 6. I was going to rate it a 7. I'm not going to rate it a 7 because I have a problem. I am not well versed as far as accounting language is concerned. So reading this book, it means I took longer to read this book in order for me to understand basically what these guys were saying. The accounting language got so much, but because he does justice for with the other things, he cannot get anything below than a 6. So I'd give the book a 6 for that. And I complain with the accounting language. I complain. Also, another thing that makes me not rate this book a bit higher is because just like this book, Rob Rose and Peter Tutoit, I don't know, man. They have a soft spot for Rupert. I don't want to go on camera saying that they are his journalists, his people. No, I'm not going to say that. Hey, I don't want to be sued. I am not saying that. But then I'm saying they just have a soft spot. Even in a book this thick, like no mistake, like nothing, Rupert, nothing. But then he tells us that Rupert and Markus Jooste were diametrical opposite people sitting in diametrical opposite ends of the Stellenbosch mafia table. And obviously, and if it's a mafia like that, and we can tell from the street gangs that obviously they must be fighting. This one's will sabotage, this one's espionage, and so forth and so forth. Even in the taxis, we see when there's battles between NTA and Santaco, there's espionage, sabotage, and all of those things. Even in factions within the African National Congress, which we belong to and we lead, we see there'd be espionage, there'd be spying, there'd be so many things. So why would that not happen within the factions of the Stellenbosch mafia? It still does not tell us what was the role of Rupert in the shenanigans that followed, that got Markus Jooste exposed. Because at the end of the day, I believe these guys are all equally evil. They are all equally corrupt. They are the same thing. But then they just have a way of protecting and shielding each other. And even if this is basically the biggest corporate scandal in post-South Africa, post-apartheid South Africa, but then it has not received the media attention that some other issues receive, because it's a white man, and a rich white man, and who occupied a very strategic position for a very long while within the table of the Stellenbosch mafia. Even if you can go to Google right now, Google South Africa's 20 richest individuals, you'll find Markus Jooste there. But a couple of years after his fall, but he's still one of the richest South Africans. Now, it's an incredible book. I think you should read it. It's a nice book. For now, it completes my this whole series on white monopoly capital. We'll be doing a top 5 on our books, the best books you can get on white monopoly capital. Check out the link in the description below.